Welcome back, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, to another edition of What Makes a Monster and What Makes a Man. This is Chapter 15, Going. Here's the summary. Steven is done with this gem stuff. Dipper can't bring himself to notice. Dipper was jumpy the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. Whenever he was starting to relax, something would remind him of the demon inside his mind. Ford humming the song under his breath. Mabel sneaking up on him. The Bill-themed decorations around the shack. Soos had been working on replacing them, but some remained. Every time they thought it was all gone, another would appear. Dipper had wandered into the old wax statue room. The light cast a triangle on the floor. Dipper was very close to smashing the window. It wouldn't be hard. He had smashed glass before. All it would take was winding up his arm and throwing the golf ball. What golf ball? Dipper opened his clenched hand. He was holding one of the golf balls from Attic Stuff Mini Golf. He couldn't remember picking it up. He must have been in the attic at the time. When had that happened? Earlier today? He had been wandering, his thoughts floating. Voices could be heard, but they had no meaning. Gone into the attic to escape. Picked up the ball. Come here. Dipper could remember his actions, but they felt disconnected. It had been like a dream. Or possession. Dipper raised his eyes towards the window. He could see Bill, frozen in the glass. Golf ball hit the floor. He ran away. Steven gave Wendy a signed copy of Sadie Killer and the Suspects album, as well as some of the lead singer's new music. She played it on the shack phonograph. Dipper tried not to think about how Robbie used brainwashing to manipulate Wendy. Bill manipulating everyone. Bill inside of Dipper's brain. They were eating dinner, and Dipper felt exhausted. He just wasn't hungry. The food had flavor, and the flavor was ash. All he wanted to do was curl up beneath the covers of his bed and lay in silence. Steven laid down his fork. Mabel, when you were collecting the gem shards, did you get every piece? Yep, took some effort to find all the really little ones, but I got them all. Why? Yellow says there's still a piece missing. I'm trying to think of where it might be. Did you use all the shards when making the sweater? I mean, I think so. I can go grab the box and check. Mabel ran off, and Steven frowned thoughtfully at his plate, as if the macaroni would tell him where to look. The shard was not in the shoebox, which meant it had probably fallen off of the sweater which had been all across town, and the gem shard was supposed to be very small. Finding it would require a lot of work. Maybe it would distract Dipper from the possibility Bill was controlling him. The next day, they decided to walk into town to see if the shard had fallen alongside the road. Hopefully it would be there. The sweater had been powerful and dangerous. Had it not been for Steven, it might have strangled someone. Dipper had to find the shard before it attached to anything, before he could hurt anyone. No, before it could hurt anyone. Dipper wouldn't let himself hurt anyone. He refused. But he had picked up that golf ball somehow. Dipper kept his head down, his eyes scanning the grass. Mabel was humming one of the Suspect songs under her breath. Grungle Stan had insisted Mabel take one ditch and Dipper take the other, to reduce the risk of being hit by a car. He and Steven had each taken a side of the road, and Ford was watching out for any vehicles. It was hot, and it was sticky, and there was sweat dripping down Dipper's back. The grass was starting to blend together. It all looked the same. He thought he saw a glint of red. When he bent down to investigate, it turned out to be a ladybug. They made it to the police station with no sign of the shard. Dipper felt woozy. Was it from the heat, or from how last summer Bill had stood here and burned the journals, been here and turned Great Uncle Ford into a golden statue, physically floated where Dipper currently stood and told the hench maniacs to eat him? The shard. Dipper had to find the gem shard. Mabel sat down beneath one of the trees. Dipper had been slammed against that tree. A spike of pain flashed through his shoulder. Bill's laughter rang in his ear. Dipper clutched his worm on a string. There was no sign of the shard. Great Uncle Ford knelt in front of Steven. I know this might be hard to hear, but I don't think we're going to find it. Steven simply nodded. I'll tell Yellow to heal the carnelian now. When the other shard turns up, she can attach it. When, not if? Gem monsters aren't exactly subtle. It will turn up sooner or later, especially since it can't leave the area. Steven started back towards the shack. Dipper tried to shake the feeling that Bill was watching them go. The problem with walking to town was that all they had to do was walk back. They looked half-heartedly, but the mood was subdued. Mabel was no longer humming, and they walked in single file alongside the road. If the shard wasn't here, it could be anywhere. Perhaps Mabel had missed it in her initial sweep for shards. Perhaps a bird had picked it up, or it had gotten stuck in a tire. Perhaps the gnomes found it and had taken it away. Dipper felt he had let the carnelian down. He was supposed to be able to help, to make up for all the damage he had caused. If he couldn't do something as simple as find a piece of a gem, how was he ever going to stop Bill from taking over? Perhaps he couldn't. They were almost back to the mystery shack when Mabel veered away. She stopped in front of the bottomless pit. Guys, what if it fell in there? If the sweater went over it and the shard came off, it might still be falling. Falling in an empty blackness, telling stories, teasing each other and laughing. When was the last time Dipper had laughed? Only one way to find out. Stephen jumped into the pit. Stephen, no! Mabel went to jump after him. Dipper grabbed her arm. What are you doing? He's gonna be fine. He'll fall for a bit and then come back out as if no time has passed. Dipper, he doesn't know that. She pulled her arm free and leapt into the pit after Stephen. Dipper needed to protect Mabel. He had to keep her safe. What if something had broken the pit and she never came out? Stephen hadn't come back yet. The pit had probably been damaged by Weird Mageddon, by Bill, because of Dipper. Never mind all that. Dipper jumped in after Mabel. And that's all for Chapter 15. Here's Chapter 16, Going Somewhere Else. Here's the summary. Welcome to the bottomless pit, the perfect place to tell stories and regret life decisions. Darkness, wind, falling. Mabel, Mabel, where are you? The voice rang out to Dipper's left. He turned his head but couldn't see her through the darkness. Dipper, what are you doing down there? He was terrified of losing her, of something happening and him not being there, of her getting hurt, of him hurting her. Figured I could keep you company. What if she wasn't really there? What if he was imagining her? Kids, what are you thinking? Stan's voice came from above. Great Uncle Ford? Grunkle Stan? Why were they here? Were they there to restrain Dipper if he got out of control? Here to imprison him and send him away like he deserved? I had to tell you something about the bottomless pit. You don't always come out at the same time you fell in. It could be any time within the next 24 hours. I didn't want you to worry when you came out. And I'm not going to leave you alone with my brother. No one deserves that. Mabel snorted. Didn't you live on a boat with him for a year? Anyway, where's Stephen? I'm right here. Stephen must be slightly below them. Why did you follow me? To tell you that this pit will eventually spit you back out at the top. Anyone have a light source? My phone has a flashlight, but it's almost out of battery. A flashlight. Dipper took out his bag and reached inside. Would this work? He held out the crystal flashlight. Perhaps, but the possible side effects of using the flashlight in a pit that warps space-time is dangerous. Maybe you should take off the crystal. Or we could use this glow stick. I never leave home without one. Mabel pulled it out and snapped it. The pit was illuminated in a soft pink glow. He and Mabel were at the same height. Their grunkles were just above them. Stephen floated up so that he was at Dipper's level. Somehow, he was able to resist the effects of the pit, work against them. Was this another gem power? Fascinating! Great Uncle Ford's eyes lit up. How are you able to counteract the pull of the pit? I'm not. I can slow my fall, but I can't fly up. Which meant Stephen couldn't resist the effects of the pit, merely slow them down. But how was he able to fly? Could it be related to shape-shifting? Maybe he could make himself wings or use telekinesis on himself. Maybe he could just float, the way Bill could. Oh, we can tell stories again. I'll go first. It's called Carpet DM. Mabel held the glow stick beneath her chin. One time, me and Dipper were fighting over who got to have a cool new room we found in the shack. Only the carpet was weird, and we ended up switching bodies. Grunkle Stan told us that whoever was nicer would get the room, so we both tried to be as mean as possible. But then Candy and Grenda came over, and Dipper got to hang out with them while I had to be lonely. Soos ended up switching bodies with Waddles, and we ended up switching back. Then we realized that neither of us wanted the new room, so we both stayed in the attic. One time I accidentally switched bodies with my friend Lars. I tried to make his life better. He stayed asleep the entire time. That is very interesting, but you need to wait your turn. Mabel handed the glow stick to Grunkle Stan. Now you tell a story. Okay, this is called Grunkle Stan Saves Everyone. Stanley, maybe you shouldn't talk about... Don't worry, you don't even have to break any rules to tell me. Connie got interested in Gravity Falls Law after I told her about how you can marry woodpeckers. The act says that if anyone asks what happens, you say never mind all that. If no one asks, then the act does not apply. That girl is something else. Sounds like she could topple a government in a couple days. She already did. I mean, she had help, but... Stephen fell silent and wrapped his arms around himself. Grunkle Stan paused, looking at Stephen worriedly. Okay, how about I tell my story? So this evil demon had gotten out, right? And we had no way to stop him, not in the physical world. But if we could get him in the mindscape, we could wipe him from existence. So we tricked him into going into my mind, and then I punched him into oblivion. He turned into that stone statue you sent away and hasn't been a threat since. Then Mabel restored my memory using her scrapbook. Bill was still a threat. Dipper kept Bill alive. Did Grunkle Stan think sending away the statue would fix everything? Bill was still inside of him. He could feel it. It was getting harder to contain him, harder to keep him from lashing out. Grunkle Stan didn't understand what Dipper was fighting constantly. How could he? Dipper was alone, with no one but Bill. Stan held the glow stick toward Stephen. "Are you okay with talking?" Stephen nodded and took it. His face was lit up by the light. "You know, Stephen," Mabel said, "pink is a really good color for you." Stephen stiffened. "You are glowing, positively radiant." The glow stick slipped from Stephen's hands. Stan grabbed it as it floated by and looked at Stephen, concerned. He could be concerned for Stephen, but not for Dipper. "You don't have to say anything if you don't want." "No, I want to tell you guys." Stephen reached out and Stan passed him the stick. "Do I need a title?" Mabel nodded her head enthusiastically. Stephen bit his lip and nodded. "Okay, well, this is called, I don't know, Teachers Deserve Better Pay. So, after we converted the Gem Empire to democracy, the Crystal Gems decided to open a school. I think I've mentioned it before. I was working there and working myself into the ground. After years of being there for others, I didn't know how to deal with not being needed. I overworked and kept trying to take on more responsibilities, or changing things that were already working. When the off-colors graduated, I ended up deciding to retire. I wanted to take some time for myself. I thought it would help. But I kept getting worse and worse and worse. Nothing was working and I kept pushing people away. I hurt Jasper. Badly. I was getting vengeful thoughts and no one was able to help. I ended up having a big breakdown. A giant one. Stephen smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was resigned and didn't reach his eyes. Stephen looked directly at Dipper. My family realized that I had been hurting and managed to save me. They got me a therapist and helped me recover. A few months later, I decided to get out and travel. Then I wound up here. There was silence when Stephen finished. From how he acted, it was almost impossible to tell all the pain and suffering he had gone through. It was way worse than anything Dipper had undergone. And Stephen was handling it better. Dipper had no reason to overreact. That's what he was doing. Overreacting. And his overreaction was hurting others. It had worried Mabel. Dipper wasn't allowed to do that. Stephen's family had supported him, helped him with his issues, not left him alone, left it to handle himself. Stephen held the glow stick towards Ford. The intention was clear. He didn't want to talk anymore. Ford took it and paused for a moment. "This is the story of one of my biggest mistakes. When I was young and foolish, I decided to try and solve the mysteries of the unusual. I wound up in Gravity Falls and started to experiment. I wound up contacting Bill. Not knowing what I was doing, I let him into my mind. It was amazing at first. I had the power to solve any question, crack any code, figure out any anomaly. But Bill started to take more and more control, dictate more and more of what I did. Towards the end, I wasn't sure if we were separate beings anymore. When I discovered his true plans, I shut my experiment down and underwent a surgery to have an aluminum plate put in my head to protect my mind. It kept him from re-entering and protected me from mind wipes, and that is one of my greatest mistakes. I should have gone with stainless steel." It started to get brighter. They were reaching the end of the pit. Bill had taken control of Great Uncle Ford. He had been unable to stop it. Then how could Dipper? Bill had sworn he would return. Bill had used Ford to get into the world last time. Grunkle Stan had paid the price. If now he was using Dipper, that meant Mabel. They came back out of the top. Panic was rising in Dipper's throat. His body refused to inhale. The world had stopped spinning and was turning too fast. He stood up and ran towards the shack, staggered up the stairs and slammed the attic door shut, fell onto his bed and let out a scream that turned into a cry. "What are you doing? You have no right to be this upset. Get a hold of yourself, pine tree." Wow, so that was a pretty good chapter. I really liked it. While of course, though, Dipper needs therapy. Like, this is very clear. Also, Stephen should be taking double therapy, because oh my goodness, the poor guy. I mean, talk about child soldier. Wow. Anyways, that's all for today. Thank you so much for listening. Next chapter will be chapter 17. It'll be up soon. Patch out.